Hey, deserving listeners, my name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. As I always say, don't use YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You deserve it. Let's watch.
My relationship with my godparents is really good compared to the rest of my family. So my mom and my dad split up when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I was living with my mom and 2 younger half-siblings, but my life changed when I turned 15 years old. My mom lost custody because she failed a drug test.
That's great. We actually are getting background childhood information. So we're hearing that his parents divorced when he was 3, and then he lived with his mom, and that absolutely can be an attachment disruption. A lot of times in our society, we think of fathers as being less important, that mothers are much more important. And it's more accurate to say that it depends on the relationship and the bond. So for some families, the mother will be home more often or home all the time, will be taking care of the kids more often, and the dad is working, is more distant. And although that relationship is very important to the children, absolutely, it's maybe not as important as their relationship with their mother. But it certainly can be reversed. The father could be the one staying home. What about gay families where there are 2 men or 2 women? So we often think of fathers as not being that big of a deal, and thus when they move out of the house during divorce, we don't think of it harming the children, but it absolutely can. There are instances where it doesn't bother the children that much, particularly if the divorce happens when the children are very young, say at like 6 months. We don't know, but we're hearing that there was a separation there, and maybe Brandan continued to have a good relationship with his dad, a very connected, bonded relationship, but there's a possibility of some kind of abandonment there. Who knows? But then we hear that he's raised in his mom's house. I'm getting over a cold, by the way. Well, getting over in the middle of a cold, I think is more accurate. I hope I'm on the downslide. Anyway, so that he had 2 half-sisters, so it sounds like she got together with someone else, maybe got married to someone else, and had 2 more kids. And then due to failing a drug test, he was taken out of the home. Usually what that means is that, and I don't know this situation, but I worked with a lot of families like this. The single parent will be struggling with a lot of trauma and a lot of stress, and that's what leads them to substance abuse, which leads them to addiction, because they need the substance not only physiologically to avoid withdrawals, but also to cope emotionally with the stress and the trauma. They're not getting proper support. And so they start to go down a road where the use and the substance becomes the focus of their life, and they neglect other kinds of things like parenting. And so they might be arrested for something, or they might have the situation where the kids are seen far from the home by themselves and CPS is called, or maybe one of the kids discloses to a teacher that they haven't seen their mom in a few days. And then the government gets involved and they start looking into things, and then they start to work with the mom, because that's their initial measure, is to try to keep the family together. They don't want to take kids out of the home because they just don't want to. Also, the government has a pretty high bar for doing that kind of thing, typically. Also, there's not a lot of money to fund foster homes, because if you took the kids out of the home, the mother wouldn't pay for the foster home, so it'd be the taxpayers. And in our society, in the United States, typically we don't allocate enough funds for that. So there are a lot of government workers, social health workers will say, well, this kid probably should be placed in a foster home for their own safety, but we just don't have the beds. We don't have the homes to do that, or the money for that. So anyway, there was probably a period of time where the government was monitoring her, and she was probably complying, who knows, and trying to get sober, who knows, hard to tell. It's also possible that the drug addiction had been there from the beginning of his life, and that she was always sort of in and out of the house, or neglectful or chaotic, who knows. Maybe it was just a period of time just before he turned 15. Then at some point she fails a drug test, and because the government has a history knowing that when she's using, it will lead to bad things for the kids, risks for the kids, then the kids are taken out of the home. Maybe just him, but probably all 3 of the kids. And then Sometimes they are placed in foster homes, but what the government prefers is if a family member or a volunteer can step forward. And it sounds like the godparents might have been those people. Hard to know what that label means. Were they friends of the family? I don't know.
I got taken away and went to my dad's, and the kids went to foster care.
Okay, so the younger siblings went into foster care, and he went to live with his dad, which, would be the first person that the government would turn to because the father probably had partial custody. So he went to live with the dad. Now, that's another big psychological event, right? Even if there's none of the chaos that might have been there, just that separation from the mom and the notions, right, that you can have in a situation. Kids will say, wow, my mom, especially if the kids know that they need to be sober in order to have them, that a parent would choose substances over them, right? And the child doesn't understand the compelling nature, the physiological nature of addiction. Not to say that parents are off the hook, but, addiction is rough, especially if there's a lot of trauma and there's not a lot of support and there's a lot of stress. So I'm guessing that Brandan has a lot of issues there. There could be more issues associated that we're not being told regarding what the mom was exposing him to, or ongoing issues of conflict or neglect that was happening. I don't know. But if I just heard this story from someone that I was assessing for therapy, I would, have at the top of my list a series of questions around their childhood to try to get at the specifics of the mistreatment that the child went through, because it could be extensive.
I felt betrayed. It really hit me hard.
Right, so he felt betrayed. He felt betrayed, I think, because the mom betrayed him by using substances and not passing the drug test so that he would have to go live with his dad. So, yeah, and especially if he didn't get along with his dad, I don't know, or there's some awkwardness there. Yeah, a lot of anger, a lot of hurt.
I spent 3 years living with my dad. He was really demanding and hostile, and so I left. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so yeah, not a good relationship with the dad, and so he left. I wonder what that means. Was he still a minor? Was he still a teenager when he left, or was it after he was 18? I don't know.
For the next few years after that, I was bouncing around a lot, looking for places to stay, looking for jobs to keep. At one point, I was living in my truck for about 2 months, and then my godparents found out, and they had me come live with them.
So, when you think of a homeless person, often you won't think of someone like this, right? But it sounds like that's the situation, right? He didn't have a house, you couldn't afford a place to live in, and there wasn't enough services in his area, or he didn't have access to, he didn't know where it was. So, yeah, often the way that homeless people are, unhomed people are portrayed in the media or in society is that, they're all criminals and people who refuse to take help, get help for their problems. But, sometimes it's a child, being a 20-year-old or something around there, and maybe younger, and you don't have anyone to help you. And how do you get a job? And it's hard enough to get a job anyway, but how do you get a job when you don't have support or a network, a social network, or you don't have a home, you don't have an address, you feel ashamed of things? Maybe you don't have internet, so you can't even look up where there are jobs. So yeah, that's really rough that he went through that.
Charity and churches teaching children how to read the Bible, and she's just a really wonderful person.
Oh, sweet.
You're sweeter. Mary is the first person who's ever made me feel good enough. She really is. She's the one who saved me from myself. My world was black and white before she came, and now it's just colorful.
Okay, so that might explain the enmeshment and the video chatting 24/7, that feeling of not wanting to lose someone, right? He has had a lot of loss, probably even more loss than what we're being told, and betrayal and being alone completely, not just alone in the way that we often think about, but alone in your truck without a job, without money, without any support, without anyone to call, without any friends, without any money, without any food. That's alone. And to have someone that loves you, would maybe for the first, who knows? I mean, who knows what the full history of the abandonment or of the distance or neglect that he's been through. There's a chance that his mom, for the first 14 years of his life, was very attuned to his emotions, but that's not usually the case when I hear something like that event happened when he was 15, but, I don't know. And he meets Mary, and they fall in love, and she loves him, and it's just like, okay, I don't ever want to let go of you, because when I was 3 and I turned around, my dad was gone, and when I was 15, I turned around and my mom was gone, and and then I was sent to live with my dad, which was very hard for me. He was very hostile to me, as he puts it. So not only is this good for attachment, but it's also dangerous if I turn around and take my eyes off of you.
Because being on the phone is not good enough for either of us. We are very obsessed with each other, honestly. I've sent Mary some shirts that I would wear. I would sweat in them and make them smell like me, get some BO in there, and then I'd ship them over to Mary, and she would put them on or put it on a pillow and sleep with it.
I don't get a chance to often talk about pheromones and the way we smell and how that can play a role in attractiveness. We've done a lot of studies on this. For example, we'll take not me, but the field of psychology will take 20 heterosexual men and 20 heterosexual women. They'll have the men work out in their shirts. They'll take the shirts off them, put them in these plastic bags, and then the women will smell each shirt and rate the attractiveness of each person. Then I think some research designs will actually have the 20 people actually meet and then decide who they're attracted to. And I think some of the studies indicate that the smell actually does correlate with the person that they would be attracted to in person. So I don't quote me on that. But the general theories as to why or even if smell has a role in attractiveness, there's a lot of different ideas. They're not strong signals, though. The way that I situate it in the overall concept or phenomenon of attractiveness is that one's smell can play a role, but it's not a major role, right? There's a lot of other reasons as to why you'd be attracted to someone: the way they look, the way they talk, the way their values, the way that they move, the way they kiss, the way they listen, the way that they handle their emotions. There's a lot of reasons why someone's attractive to you, smell being one of them. And it's possible that even if someone has all the checking of the boxes, but they have a smell that just turns you off, maybe even sub-perceptually, meaning you don't pick up on it consciously, you might not want to be with that person because of their smell. Or because someone's smell is so attractive, you might overlook some boxes not being checked, that kind of thing. So, it's similar to any other factor when it comes to attract. There's a lot of factors, apparently, that go into why two people are attracted to each other. But there are a number of theories as to smell and its role and why we would have evolved that mechanism. And off the top of my head, I think one of the theories is that it has to do with picking up on immune system indications, so that the idea goes is that we were, as humans, selected for, and maybe our ancestors, maybe other primates, have a similar kind of mechanism where you are compelled to mate and thus procreate with someone that has a different immune system than you, and thus you pass on to your children both or parts of both of your immune systems, so that will help the child to survive. This is not a conscious thing, of course, but over time you can have an animal, such as humans, selected for sexually, such that that will play itself out for us today. So that's one possible theory, but it's not a strong theory. Another theory is that it has to do with our childhood. When you were a child, there were certain smells around. I'm trying to think for myself. I mean, this doesn't have to do with sex or romance, but when I smell kimchi, for example, that's Korean, I'm Japanese, but a lot of Japanese people eat kimchi because it's great. I would have kimchi sandwiches, for example, growing up, just wheat bread with kimchi sandwich. It was great. And when I smell kimchi, I smell home and hearth and warmth and family and good times and all that kind of stuff. But when my wife smells kimchi, because she didn't grow up with it, she smells dirty socks and disgusting, rotting vegetables, which is essentially what it is. So, along those lines, if I were to meet someone on a date who smelled like kimchi, maybe even if it was subconscious, it would be a tick in the direction of attraction to that person. Whereas if my wife smelled kimchi on someone, she might just smell dirty socks and rotting cabbage. In terms of romantic attraction or comfort attraction, the smells that your parents had, maybe their pheromones or the cologne they used or the soap they used or the dish or the laundry soap that they used or smells that were going on in the house, that kind of thing. Or your first partner in high school, the way that they smelled, maybe the association. We often think about sexuality as being kind of fixed throughout our life, but it really is not. There are so many things that can affect one's attraction over time. Maybe not one's sexual orientation necessarily, but the sort of person that you're attracted to. People say like, oh, I'm attracted to blondes or brunettes, or I like tall guys or whatever. Often that could be encoded in your very first few relationships, maybe even your very first relationship. And that relationship could just be like a parasocial relationship, right? Someone that you fell in love with that was famous, and it sort of locks in a particular way that someone looks, or the qualities that they have, or a hairstyle or something, or whether or not they have tattoos, that kind of thing. Another theory is that the smell indicates genetic fitness, similar to how we are attracted to people that are symmetrical and in general on average. The theory about that is that for people that are asymmetrical in their face or their body, it is a sign that genetically they are not as fit as someone who is symmetrical, right? They will do studies and they'll take someone's face and they'll mirror image it, and almost always that version of their face is more attractive to people looking at the face than their real face. So with smell, the theory goes that you can smell someone's genetic fitness. You can smell if someone genetically has mutations that are not going to be favorable versus people that are. So that's another idea. There are other ideas as to smell being related to how closely related you are to someone, meaning that you might smell a very familiar thing subconsciously that tells you, oh, that person is close genetically, and that might actually cause someone to be not attracted to them. They might want, genetically, we might have been selected for choosing people that are more far afield from us genetically, because when you take people that are more different genetically, then things tend to go better. I'm not a biologist. I think it has to do with recessive genes and that kind of thing. But anyway, so there's a lot of theories regarding that. And so for Brandan, he's sending his shirt. And in some ways, that would help, because if you can't see each other in person, smelling, let's say she got the shirt and she smells it, she's just like, oh, no. And then, or subconsciously, and so, because that would be good to know prior to later, right? So there's that. It also can facilitate a lot of bonding. In lieu of being able to see each other in person, being able to, one of the sad examples of this is if you have lost someone, someone close to you died, and like a spouse or something, and you still have some of their shirts that have not been washed, and you don't ever want to wash them, because when you smell the shirt, you smell your partner that has passed. That's a very meaningful example of someone's smell being important to us. So when he sends the shirt over, they're playing the comical music, so I'm guessing it's supposed to be funny, but it's fine. It's not normal. It's not a normal thing that people do, but just because something isn't normal doesn't mean that it's wrong or problematic. All right, well, we have a membership program. You can join this channel by clicking the join button. If you can't see the join button, you might have to scroll down to get a link. And when you become a member, it carries with it some benefits. I do exclusive videos for members, and I also am much more likely to see your comment, because I will look for comments made by members, and I will probably reply or like it or something. So if that interests you, or you just want to support what we're doing, because becoming a member absolutely does give me the ability to make these videos, but it's up to you and your finances, of course. No pressure, no guilt tripping, and everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.